Chapter 13, Laws of Hanukkah. It gets its own chapter, even though really it's just two details about the Hanukkah candles. But these details, apparently, it's very complicated in the modern era, in our modern situation. Two questions are when and where to light the Hanukkah candles. When, in terms of timing, obviously 8 days, the 8 days of Hanukkah, and we know, well, when it gets dark, okay, but what exactly does it mean to get dark? And then the question of where is also, I think it was simpler in previous times. You had a small little hut, one-room house, and you light the candles, as we're going to see, at the doorway. But nowadays we have a few doorways, and we have windows, and it's more complicated. So let's get into the details of these two questions. And we'll see practically, man, sometimes we even have many houses. You have the house in your dorm room, but then you have maybe a home where your parents live, and so people travel. Where do you light the candles when you're traveling? So let's see. The first question we start with chapter 13 is where to light. I'll just give a minute for Yosef to come in back. Whoever wants peanuts, there's some peanuts here. Very yummy. And although they're not from Eretz Israel. Apparently they do grow them in Israel, but these are American peanuts. Lots of protein. It's good for you. It's good for you. You vegetarians in particular. Right. Okay. Thank you, Binyamin. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. I sit next to Eidan on the other side of him. Thank you. Ami, come. Ami, what's your name? Amram. It was Boker Tov. Welcome back. You're still traveling back and forth to Tivon, or you're pretty much done? You're almost done over there?
Yeah, at the end of December,
At the end of December, okay. So it's still a month to go, though. So, anyways, I'm glad you're here now. Grab a book, Binyamin, and we'll get started. Eov, good morning. We're learning chapter 13, the laws of Chanukah. Everybody's being nice to each other, giving each other the place. Eov, why don't you read it for us, please? Yeah.
Chapter 13?
13, yeah.
Where to light. The sages state one of the candles should be placed at the doorway outside the home. One who lives on an upper floor places the window facing the street. In times of danger, it is sufficient to place them on the table.
Okay, so now we're studying Talmud. This is a quote from the Talmud. We have to analyze. Who can tell me? What are the options for lighting Hanukkah candles mentioned in this small, I believe it's a Braita. A Braita is a statement by Tanaim, the sages of the first 200 years of our fourth period of Chazal, right? The Tanaim. But it didn't make it into the Mishnah. This is not a Mishnah. And so bar means outside. So Baraita it's outside of the Mishnah. That's right. It's Tanaitic material. It has tremendous weight because it's written by the sages of the Tanaitic period, but it's not in the Mishnah. So that's why it's called a Baraita. Okay, so far so good. So what does it tell us? Where do we put the Hanukkah candles?
Outside.
Can we let's write it down on the board. Where to place the Hanukkah candles? First, second, and three options. Let's hear your Talmudic mind, Amram. What do you analyze from this statement? Where's the best place? First option, second option, and third option.
I cannot see from my glasses, so.
Okay, so but you can see the book. So
Yeah.
Teavon.
Outside of our.
Outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the question is whenever in danger.
No, the question is where do you light
General.
Hanukkah candles in general? Where do you...
Opposite the mezuzah.
That's very nice, but we're reading a text. I'm just trying to read the text with you, very simply. Maybe there's 4 definitions in the. I'll keep it at 3. What are the 3 options?
First, it should be placed on a close to the doorway,
Yeah.
then outside the home.
Okay.
In times of danger, you put it inside.
Yeah. Okay, but you're still not you're not reading the text. Read the text. It has 3 statements. There's three stages. It's very clear. It's very clear. First stage is at doorway. And they add, the doorway obviously has an inside and an outside. So the doorway, outside the doorway. Not on the inside of the doorway, but the outside of the doorway. Then there's another option. What does it say? If you're in danger, one who lives in an upper floor, you're in an upper floor, you don't have a doorway to the outside. You have to go inside the ground floor and then go up the stairs and then you go inside. You don't have a doorway that faces the outside. So what do? Window. Option number 2 is the window. And then the Mishnah continues, the Braita, continues. In times of danger, sufficient to place them on the table. So we have here a third option of where to place the Hanukkah candles. I'm just reading. We have to train our minds. Okay? Doorway plus outside. It's the first option. Outside the doorway. Second option, in the windowsill. And the third option is inside on your table.
Stairs.
Stairs is a good question. It's not mentioned in this text.
No.
No, it sounds like there's the options are doorway, window, or table. Now, what you're suggesting is maybe there's a doorway to the stairs. Right? The upper floor, if you have your own unit in an apartment building, you go up the stairs and then you have another door. Well, that's a door. Maybe that qualifies as number 1. Does it qualify as number 1? Some people say yes, but some people say no. Why? What's the debate?
It's not going to be public.
It's not going to be outside. Right? Number 1 said doorway, but it's got to be outside. If you're in the stairwell, is that considered outside? Some people say yes, because there's people going up and down the stairs.
Yes.
You have your neighbors. But some people say no, it's not outside, because who do you want to see the candles? The public. You want it to be open to the public. This is just a few people walking up and down the stairs. It's not public enough. So there's a debate about the doorway into your stairwell because of this just reading the text. It says doorway, but the whole point of the doorway is it should be outside the home so you people can pass by. So that's a good question, yeah.
My case, it has a little bit gate,
Mm.
and then I put here in the top of the gate.
Good, interesting. We're going to see all these cases.
Yeah.
We're going to see lots of different people have yards, gated yards. Question is, what's considered to be your house? As you can see, there's a lot of details. But this is the starting point. Reading the Braita. I'm pretty sure it's a Braita. I don't have a Masachat Shabbat here to look it up. Oh, I do. It could be it's an Amoraic statement. See here? Where do I look? Where would I look? Where's the origin of this statement?
21.
Masachet Shabbat, Talmud Bavli, Masachet Shabbat. Have it right here. I'll open it up. I'll open to page 21. You know how to do the Hebrew letters? What's 21? Chaf is 20. Chaf Aleph. And B. What's B? This is Chaf Aleph. See, it says on the top Chaf Aleph. It says page 21. but this is one side. It's called the folio. So one side of the folio is A, and this doesn't say anything here. There's no letters. This is Chaf Bet over here. So this is 21b. Okay, this is Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. So here I'm going to find the source of this statement. Here it is. Yes, it's a Braita. I was right. Okay, this is a Braita. There's terms used in the Talmud. When you start studying Gemara, you'll learn them. Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan is an introduction of a Braita. There's another word for introducing a Mishnah. It's very nice editing. The editors really gave us some tools to understand which layer each text comes from. The layers of authority. Remember we talked about that the other day? That there's the Tanaitic layer and then the Amoraic layer within the Talmud. Right? Mishnah and Gemara. But even within the Gemara, sometimes they quote other Amoraim, but sometimes they quote Tanaim. And that is going to be from a Braita or a Mishnah. And so we have different notations for each one. So that's what I looked up. I saw the introduction was Tanu Rabbanan, which means the rabbis taught, but it means much more than that. It means the source is a Braita. The rabbis taught in a Braita, meaning I know that it's Tanaitic material, and I know it's not in the Mishnah, but it is from Tanai, and it's still valuable even though it's not inside the Mishnah. If it's not contradicted by any other Mishnah, then it's binding, especially if it's brought in the Talmud. There's other Braitot which are not brought in the Talmud; they're collected in another book. It actually appears in the back of each volume of the Talmud. The printers decided to give extra value, and they added in another book. You can see on the top it says Tosefta Masechet Shabbat. This is, of course, the text. Down here is lots of commentary. But what this is, it's really just a few pages. It's not very long. There you can see Tosefta Perek Rishon. This is a collection of Braitot. Some of them are quoted from the Gemara, in the Gemara, and some are not quoted in the Gemara. They're just collected here. Not random necessarily, but external Tanaitic statements, which are not part of the Mishnah, but they're still the words of the holy Tanaim. Very important scholarship. So anyways, back to our sugya. Hananel, good morning. How are you? Grab yourself a book.
So the Baraita author cannot override the Ta'in.
Yeah, he can argue. There can be arguments between Tanaim. So you can have a Tana and a statement in the Mishnah, and a Tana making another statement in the Braita, and they will contradict each other sometimes.
But we cannot get halakha from Baraita.
We can, if there's a competition. Usually the Mishnah is more authoritative. Because
even though Baraita doesn't have a status as Gemara, it's like it's kind of Gemara, Baraita, right?
Let me explain. I'll do it on the board here. So we have Chazal, right? What does Chazal stand for? There's two stages of Chazal. Stage 1 and stage 2. And the end. So the Tanaim, they wrote statements. Some of them were collected in a great big book. The first great big book of Judaism. It's called the Mishnah. Maybe not the first great big book. What would be the first great big book? The Tanakh. Right. But the second great big book of Judaism is called the Mishnah. But there's also other statements which didn't make it into the Mishnah, For example, I just showed you another collection. Tosefta. Inside the Mishnah, the individual piece, the individual teaching is called a Mishnah. It's very easy to remember. But inside the Tosefta, each individual teaching is called a Braita. Okay? Both of these are Tannaitic material. The rabbis from year 0 to 200. And then something magical happened. Good morning, Chanoch. How are you? All right. We're learning some Talmud. That's just starting off the day with some heavy stuff, deep stuff. Did you ever learn some Talmud before?
My bad to deep stuff.
Yo, okay, yeah. Okay, all right. Good morning. Anyways, then Amram, what happened after year 200, the Mishnah was finished by a fellow called Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He was a prince, a leader, president of the Jewish people. And he finalized this book. And then from then on, all of the Jewish scholars said, wow, we are not worthy of arguing against the opinions of the sages in the generation before us. It's really strange. It's a very strong dividing line between the Amoraim. All the Amoraim decided we're going to accept the words of the Tanaim, and none of us can contradict the words of the Tanaim. We're going to discuss them. And of course there are contradictions, so we have to decide who should we follow. So we follow this Tana or that Tana. You see that word? Tana, Amora. The Amoraim said we accept the words of the Tanaim. And we interpret them and we discuss them. And you know what the text that was produced from their discussions? It's called Gemara. It's from the same word as Amorah. The sayers. Amar. Gemara. Statements. The Gemara is full of statements of the Amoraim which add or analyze upon what was in the Mishnah. But they never contradicts. They don't have the power. Somehow they accept it upon themselves. The Tanai, the first 200 years of Chazal, they are on a higher level than us. And once Rabbi Yehuda Nasi closed that era, like by writing out the Mishnah, the most we can do is discuss it. And like I said, interpret it. And they had tremendous discussions for hundreds of years. 200 till 500, actually till 600 in Bavel. They continue to discuss it. That's hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. The sum total of this entire endeavor, the Tanaim and the Amoraim, we call it the Talmud. And that is really, the Talmud consists of the Mishnah with the discussions of the Gemara about the Mishnah. Okay, so Amram, the Tanaim can argue with each other. And the Amoraim can argue with each other. The only thing is the Amoraim do not argue on the Tanaim. In any case, we have a discussion now. We're quoting from, look, I picked up the book so I can show you where it comes from. Talmud Bavli, Masechet Shabbat. That's page 265 is where we started to read. Page 265. We opened up today with a quote from the Talmud. And I looked it up to make sure, but I told you that this quote, even though it's in the Talmud, which era does it come from? Not from the Amoraic era, but from the Tanaitic era. It's not a Mishnah. There's very few references to Hanukkah in the Mishnah, but there are Baraitot. This particular Braita is quoted in the Tosefta. There's actually footnotes in this edition of the Talmud, and here it gives you. This is not from a Braita; it's from another source. There's a few other sources of Masechet Sofrim, Tannaitic material. We mentioned it yesterday. That's where the opening statement about Hanukkah, that you on the 25th of Kislev, the Hasmoneans came and they purified the temple. A lot of the sources for Hanukkah come from Masechet Sofrim. This is also called a Braita. Anything that's outside of the Mishnah is called a Braita, if it's on a Tannaitic level. So this is a Braita which is quoted from Masechet Sofrim. Right, there's a few other places we mentioned before. Other Tannaitic sources, we mentioned Megillat Ta'anit. Megillat Ta'anit. That's where we have the day as a holiday. You're not allowed to fast and you're not allowed to eulogize. So anyways, there's a whole gamut of Tannaitic sources. When it comes to Gemara, pretty much their words are collected in the Gemara. Nowhere else that I know of, or that I can think of now. There is, and I want to teach you about them also. There is another type of literature which is in parallel to the Talmud. The Talmud is the major repository of the words of Chazal. But there's one other major book or series of books where the words of Chazal are collected. It's called Midrash. There's Midrashim from the Tannaitic era, and there's Midrashim from the Amoraic era. But it's also Tannaitic. So you can have a Tana and the words of his recorded in the Midrash. You can have his words recorded in all these other sources. You can have words of Amoraim quoted in the Gemara, and then you'll find some of the discussions in a different book called the Midrash. Both. What's important is they both get their authority because they come from this golden era of Judaism called the era of Chazal. Chachamim, Zichronam, Livracha. Questions, comments? Yes?
So Rabbi, if all of the texts of the Tanaim, the Amoraim cannot override.
Correct.
They say that
That's right. They don't argue against the Tana ever. There's a few exceptions. Like every good rule, there has to be exceptions. But that's the general rule. Omaraim cannot argue against Tanaim.
And they are getting like extracting the halacha from the Tanaim? Or?
Sure. So now if you're an Amora, you want to lead your flock. You want to practice your Judaism. So you have two sources of authority. Of course, you have the Tanakh, and you have the oral traditions, but a lot of the oral traditions were written down in the period of the Tanaim. And so you have to search throughout all the Tannaitic material. You know, they didn't have so many books back then. You know how they would study? The word Tana means to repeat. It was all Ba'al Peh, it was all oral. So for example, in those days, if they wanted to study Masechet Shabbat, did they have this book that they could bring over? No. So you know what they did? They had Amram. He would sit for hours and days, good morning. He would sit and he would repeat the Mishnayot of Masechet Shabbat over and over and over again until he knew it off by heart. By the way, my son went to a school like that where they taught them the Mishnayot over and over and over again. And he knows a lot of them off by heart. And another son of mine also, he studies. The words of the Mishnah are as the core, such a basic text. So, and it's very nice to have it in your head. And then when they said that, okay, we want to study the laws of Shabbat, but I can't remember what that text was. So they said, Amram, come on over, please recite for us Masechet Shabbat. Chapter 5, maybe they'd ask for. Push the play button, out would come the Mishnayot. That's why he's called a Tana. Tanaim. What does it say in the Shema every day? We say, Vishinantam levanecha. It's a word of Mishnah, Vishinantam. It means to repeat. Repeat them to your children.
The word is Hebrew or Latin?
This is Aramaic, and Mishnah is Hebrew. Shana. It comes from the Hebrew in the Chumash. In the Shema, we say, you shall teach them to your children. Vishinantam. Teach is not really the best translation of the word Vishinantam. Leshanen, until today. Leshanen means to repeat. Ba'af b'heart. Is there a word for that in English? To repeat off by heart? It's like to
Memorize by heart.
Memorize, yeah, but then you recite it. You recite it off by heart. Anyways, that's what it means. That's the word Leshanen means. And there we get the source of the word Mishnah. And that's why they're called, the authors of the Mishnah and the Mishnah period, they're all called Tanaim. It's like Shanaim. The Taf and the Shin switch between Aramaic and Hebrew. So all the Tanaim are authors of Mishnayot, repeaters of Mishnayot, repeaters of this oral Torah. For the first time, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi collects them all, puts them in a book. And then, from then on, you don't have to ask people to come over. Bring over the book. Look it up inside the book. In any case, other questions, comments?
The Tosefta Baraita cannot overrule the Tana?
They're on the same level, so they can argue with each other, for sure. There's words of Tanaim in all these different texts, also in the Midrash. Many times they will contradict what it says in the Mishnah. And it depends on the discussions in the Gemara, which one we follow for halakha. What's the general rule for how we decide what the halakha is if there's a machloket between different Tanaim? We follow the Rov. That's the general rule. Of course, there's exceptions. If there's a great custom that we see that everybody's following, one individual versus the majority, sometimes the custom will override the general rule. We follow the majority. For some reason, the custom became like the minority opinion. We find that as well. But the general rule is we follow the majority. But that's for halachic purposes. We have to know what to follow. But the period of all the words of the Tanaim, we say about them, these and those are the words of the living God. Elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim chayim. All of the words of the sages. They're not said with prophecy, but it's the replacement for prophecy. It's the next step. They had inspiration. They had divine inspiration. Okay, so these are the words of that. So we're learning now, today we're learning the Braita, which teaches us the laws of Chanukah, about where to place the Chanukah menorah. But before we continue, I really want to say a few more words about the Midrash. It's parallel to the Talmud in that it comes from the period of Chazal. And therefore it has a very, very holy status, very authoritative status. What's the difference between the Talmud and the Midrash? Stephen, do you remember? It's not your first time doing this, but do you remember? It's a little bit of a tricky question. What most people think about Midrash is wrong. That's why I'm not going to wait to embarrass anybody. Midrash, what most people think, it means, it's legends, fairy tales, all sorts of strange stories. That's incorrect.
It's Russian.
Sorry?
Should be the drush. Like
No, no. Oh, the word midrash comes from drash to derive. It's true.
Tradition.
They are good nicely to the Talmud.
Yafeh. The only difference between them, the main thing is their authority. When you discuss Jewish text, the main thing is what period they come from. These are both from the period of Chazal, so they have a very high authority. Tanaim and Amoraim are the authors of the Talmud, and they're the authors of the Midrash too. So what's the difference? It's a different book. Basically, the Midrash sort of got pushed out by the new young kid on the block. Who was the young kid on the block? The Mishnah and the Gemara. Because the Mishnah and the Gemara is a new organizational structure. The Talmud equals, it was 6 orders, right? It's a new organizational structure. There's a section about agriculture, there's a section about women's laws, there's a section about holidays, a section about the temple laws. It's very organized. But what's the organization system of the Midrash?
The Chumash.
The Chumash and the Tanakh, the 24 books of the Tanakh. Basically, it's a little more intuitive if you consider the Tanakh to be the major book of Judaism. You want to comment about Shabbat? You don't look in Masechet Shabbat. You go look up the psukim in the Torah that discuss Shabbat. And it's sort of like a commentary on the Torah. What Midrash is, it's the words of the Tanaim and the Amoraim, the sages, right? So we usually call them the sages. It's the words of the sages on the books of the Tanakh. It's sort of a little bit old-fashioned. Once Rabbi Yehuda Nasi came up with a new system, there's a new major book. So all the discussions, most of the discussions, happen in that, as the Gemara is discussing the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah and the Gemara. That becomes the new foundational, central book of all Jewish tradition and the discussions about it. There is another former book, the first book of Judaism, that still doesn't go away. And the discussions of these Tanaim and Amoraim were collected in books which are written sort of like a commentary on the Tanakh. This is 1,000 years before Rashi. Okay? Right? Period of Chazal. Years 0 to 500. Rashi is about 1100. So, between 600 to 1,000 years before Rashi. The first commentary on the Torah, almost the first, is Midrashim. There's something a little bit before the Midrash, which is from a previous era. Perhaps the first commentary, Jewish commentary, on the Tanakh are the translations, the Targum. There's a few, so Targumim, all right, in Hebrew. Targum is the translation. Every translation is also a commentary. But the Midrash is more than a translation. It's discussions of and elaborations upon the words of the Chumash and the Nevi'im and the Ktuvim. But essentially that's the only difference. The main thing is it comes from the words of Chazal. Now, I want to make it clear. We have the Talmud and the Midrash, right? So I'll just do it one more time. The words of Chazal are written down in 2 major places: Talmud and the Midrash. I'm just taking it up from the bottom of the board to the top. The words of Chazal we find them in 2 places, 2 major repositories. Don't get confused. The words of the sages include 2 types of discussions. usually we call them legal discussions, and non-legal. Everything else. Philosophy, history, what else? Legends, lots of good stuff. But it's not legal, it's not a question of law. What are the Hebrew names for these two categories? Halacha
And Agada.
and Agada. Halacha and Agada. Where do we find them? In the Talmud. There's a mixture of Halacha and Agada. And in the Midrash, there's a mixture of Halacha and Agada. Many people associate the Midrash with Agada and the Talmud with Halacha. It's not really true. In the Midrash, there's plenty of Halacha, and in the Talmud, there's plenty of Agada. It's a mixture. The words of the Chazal, they discuss both matters, Halacha and Agada, and then we find their words collected and written down in the two major books. The Talmud becomes the most important one, as you know, but the Midrash is from the same time period as Chazal, and sometimes we actually have two different types of Midrashim. The Midrash Halacha is a separate book, and the Midrash Agada is a separate book. Right here, I happen to have one of the books, which is a Midrash Halacha. It has a name. It's on the book of Shmot. This is the Midrash Halacha in the book of Shmot. Okay, it's in English and Hebrew. It's a very nice addition. Guess what the catch though is? Guess what you have inside? Also Agada. Even though officially it's separated and it's known as a Midrash Halacha, there's more Halacha in it than in the other book, Midrash Agada, but there's also plenty of Agada in the Midrash Halacha.
So we never really separated.
Never really separated. Until today, there's a struggle and a fight, and here we are under the mentorship of Rav Kook. He was bemoaning, one of his pet peeves was that over the course of hundreds of years of exile, the scholars made too much of a division between Halacha and Agada, and we have to bring them back together again. Like in the Talmud is full, every page is a little bit of Halacha, almost every page, and a little bit of Agada, or it's a few pages of this and then a few pages of that, and the division is easy for our thinking, right? Because some guys go to law school, and then some people go to become poets, and they go to the history department. Two totally separate departments. In the Talmud, they're all together. So maybe it's easy for our thinking. Okay, we're going to focus on the halachic era, legal areas, and other scholars will take care of the lore and the philosophy department. In the Talmud, it's all together. And it's from the same sages. It's all the words of Chazal. You have the words of Chazal. In one moment, you're going to have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai discussing where the Hanukkah candles have to be lit. And on the next page, you'll have the same rabbis discussing what the meaning of Hanukkah is and what the central focus is in terms of philosophy and theory and interpreting the verses of the Tanakh. It's a mix. The sages were so amazing. That's until today, what's so overwhelming about this period. Both the Tanaim and Amoraim were such wide scholars, such deep scholars, such deep thinkers, and very well versed in all of the Torah tradition. That's why until today we follow their words. Their words, divinely inspired. The words of the sages are very, very impressive. Whenever you study more, you appreciate them more. Sure, there were some scholars that were more experts in this type of law. Some scholars were more experts in Agadah. But for the most part, they all dealt with all issues. And we shouldn't really have the division between halacha and Agadah when we study Talmud also. There is, last hundreds of years, there has been, perhaps in the yeshivot, a focus on studying the halachic, the legal aspects. But it's, the Agadah aspects are left for the common folk, right? There's the intellectuals who could deal with all the legal intricacies. Those people just tell me what to do and inspire me with some words of Agadah. Until today, you find that. Sometimes a rabbi gives a speech, depends who he's speaking to. It's the same rabbi. He's a great Talmudist. But if he's speaking to the common folk for 5-10 minutes between Mincha and Maariv, he'll teach them primarily Agadah. Speak about interesting messages, values, which are backed up by all sorts of stories from the Tanakh and from the time of the sages. And that same rabbi, if he's invited to a yeshiva, he'll get into some legal discussions and fine points about the laws of Shabbat or women's laws or the laws of korbanot. So yet, to be a Jewish scholar, you have to have such a vast array of expertise. Legal expertise and Agadah expertise as well. And Baruch Hashem, that's who we are as people. We don't have only one side of the brain. We have two sides of the brain, or many, many sides of the brain. The brain is so complex. And human personality. It's not that these people are totally, robotic thinkers. You also have a soul. And you also have a spirit. And the ideal Jewish scholar is, what do they call them in English? Somebody who knows so many different topics. There's a word for like a genius, for a scholar who's Gaon is a nice appellate where people say, we'll talk about what that means. It means genius. In modern Hebrew, it means a genius. But no, I'm still talking about it in English.
Renaissance man?
A Renaissance man, that's right. A Renaissance man. He knows everything. He knows a lot about everything, right? So the sages were Renaissance men, way before the Renaissance. In Hebrew, the term is ish eshkolot, a man of bundles. An eshkol is a bunch of grapes, right? Eshkol is a bunch of grapes, right?
I see like the town or the street called Eshkol.
Yeah, that's also because if you see names of street, it's a cluster of grapes. It's because there was one of the presidents of Israel. His family name was Eshkol, so they named streets after him. But Eshkol means a cluster, and someone who is a Renaissance man who knows about everything. He is called Ish Eshkolot, a man of clusters. Sorry?
He's a musician also.
Yeah, sure. King David, he was a king. He was a warrior. And he was a poet. And a musician, according to our tradition, right? With the harp in the middle of the night. So yeah, the Jewish, the ideal man, according to Judaism, is someone who's also a scholar and a lover. And a fighter, and a legalist, a lawyer, and also an inspirational figure, and deeply religious soul. So that's the ideal. That's what we're training to be. That's why you come to Machon Meir for at least 2 months to be able to accomplish all that. Okay, maybe 2 years. Okay, maybe 20 years. It's a lifelong goal. Right? That's why you always have to keep studying. Here I am teaching, but I'm also studying. I'm also trying to develop myself in all these various branches. My halachic knowledge, my analysis of the Talmudic discussions in the Gemara, and my appreciation of the non-legal traditions, the philosophy, understanding, the interpersonal relationships we speak about on Sunday. All this is part of Torah. It's all part of Torah. Okay, the premier era is from the era of Chazal, and the era of Chazal is a direct result of the Hanukkah story. I'd like to share with you now, just to make it a little more real, one example of a Midrash Halacha. Hope there's enough for everybody. Pass these around.
And on the bottom there, Yosef, on the bottom sheet, you pass the.
Here's another one. Midrash Halacha. Turn it over. There's one that says Midrash Agadah and one says Midrash Halacha. I want you to look at the one that says Midrash Halacha first. Anybody else need one? Anybody else? Oh, pass it down. It might be on the flip side of the page you got. Some of them are double two-sided. Some of them are not. I'm out. I think I'm out. Oh, I got one more. Hang on. Who needs Midrash Halacha? Pass it down. Nope. Midrash Halacha. You have it? You have. Anybody else needs? Pass it down. Anybody else? Have you got? Okay, let's read it from the top. It's a pasuk. That's the organizational structure, right? Organizing principle is you bring a pasuk and then you bring commentary on it. It's not quite commentary, but this is actually the in bold is the actual text. In between is some explanations. Okay, so who wants to read it for us? Amram, maybe you'll read for us from the top.
Yeah. Justice you shall push.
Well, don't think that's a mistake. This is a language of the pasuk. The pasuk says tzedek, tzedek, twice. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. So you can't skip it. You have to say it. We're going to see it's very significant. Why did the Torah repeat itself and say the word tzedek twice? Go ahead. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. Go ahead.
How do we know that one who is acquitted by the Beidin?
Where are you reading? Where are you reading?
Third paragraph.
No, read from the first paragraph, please.
Okay.
From the top, yeah.
Justice shall you pursue in order to that you might live and inherit the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
Okay, that's the pasuk. Now the explanation. Read the explanation based on.
Based on the exegetical principle that the Torah contains no superfluous words, the Midrashim often derive laws from seemingly unnecessary or difficult words. For example, a Midrash on this verse begins by explaining the expected repetition of the word justice.
Go ahead.
Justice shall pursue. How do we know that one who is acquitted by the Beidin cannot later be convinced?
Convicted. Acquitted means let off of punishment. Convicted means that he's guilty of punishment.
The text says, justice you shall pursue. How do we know that one who is convicted can go back to court to be acquitted? The text says, justice you shall pursue.
Okay, the Midrash equates justice with acquittal, and therefore argues the one may go out of the way to pursue acquittal, but not conviction. Okay, so the double language, tzedek, tzedek, we derive a law. It's a law that if someone had a court case and he was convicted, and then someone says, "Oh, I got new evidence." Bring the case back to the court. Maybe he'll be acquitted. Maybe he'll be let off the hook, because we would prefer that people be found innocent instead of guilty. But if the opposite, someone was found innocent, and then someone says, "Oh, no, I got new evidence," you can't bring it back to court.
Double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy, yeah. That's right. There's a phrase for that. Okay, so we see a derivation from the way the Torah spoke about justice in the Pasuk. That's one. We could stop here. But the Midrash Halacha continues and learns a second Halacha from the same words. Fascinating. Okay, Idan, take it over. Another interpretation.
Another interpretation. Justice you shall pursue a beit din court that rules well. Finally, the Midrash wonders why this commandment to pursue justice is one of the few biblical commandments whose promised reward is long away.
Wait, so first of all, what is that interpretation, the second one? What do they learn out from the words? If you're going to go to court, choose one that you think is a good one. There could be various courts, right? Maybe they're better scholars. Maybe they're I don't know, more upright individuals than the other one. How do we know that you should look for the best one? From this verse, tzedek tzedek tirdof. You shall pursue justice, and part of the rules, and it's in the rule books afterwards, in the Shulchan Aruch, you should always strive to go to the best beit din, the one that's most just. We learn it out from this verse. It's a derivation from the verse. This is called drasha. This is exegesis. We learn things out from the various, very, very careful reading of the psukim. Okay? Yeah.
So if you go to a court and you're convicted, then can you go to another court to be ruled?
No, usually not. It depends. It's a little more complicated, obviously. There's pages and pages written on the details of how and which courts you're allowed to go, and this whole idea of, is there an appeals court? Is there a high court? There's different levels of the court system, so it's quite complicated. But we're just showing you the structure, that there's a verse, and then things we derive from the verse, halachic matters. That are you allowed to go back to the same court? Are you? And this is the second halacha, is that you should choose well which court that you go to. And what's the third halacha? Go ahead, Idan. In order
that you may live and inherit the land. This teaches that one who appoints appropriate judges brings life to the people of Israel and returns them to their land and prevents them from falling to the sword.
Okay, this is called Sifrei Devarim. This is the Midrash Halacha in the book of Devarim. Before I showed you the Midrash Halacha in the book of Shmot. Each one gets its own name. You don't have to know it now. But this is the Midrash Halacha on the book of Devarim is called Sifrei. Okay, read the explanation.
Through a close reading of a biblical verse, this Midrash derives two legal principles. Jewish law allows for appeals, but not for double jeopardy, and one is obligated to seek out a just court. The Midrash also makes a homiletic point about the importance of appointing good judges who, according to this text, may be responsible for the life or death of the community.
Wow. So if we want to have Tzahal win the war against Hamas, what do we have to be careful about? According to this pasuk and the Midrash, it says we have to appoint appropriate judges. What have we been arguing about in Israel for the last year? Appointing judges. I hope we'll be successful in the war, and I'm not sure we were so successful about appointing good judges. But according to that, this is what returns us to the land and prevents us from falling to the sword. But if you look at the pasuk at the top of the page, justice you shall pursue in order that you may live and inherit the land. So the Midrash is pointing out, it seems like inheriting the land that the Lord your God is giving you is dependent on the court system. That's why it's so important to fight for the court system that should be better than it is, as good as it can be. Very cool. We learned the Midrash Halacha. Right? We started off the morning learning a Braita. It was from Masechet Sofrim, actually. And now we learned a Midrash Halacha. Okay, Midrash Halacha. Now, I'd like to show you a Midrash Agada. Turn over your page. Some of you don't have it on the opposite side of your page, and I'll give it to you now. Pass this around. Midrash Agada. It's a famous one. It's very exciting. We're learning the words of Tanaim all morning. We learned the Braita, and now we're learning 2 Midrashim. Wow. Did you go to the mikvah? Are you ready? We're reading the words of the sages. You didn't come to shir by Rabbi Menachem Weinberg. You're studying the words of the sages from 2,000 years ago. The golden era of Jewish scholarship. The founders of the entire Talmud. It's unbelievable. What a class. Aren't you glad you came? I am. I'm glad I came. Midrash Haggadah. Ready? Okay. Yosef, will you read for us?
In Ramadan, in the presence of his father Terah. Rabbi here said Terah was a manufacturer of idols. He once went away somewhere and left Abraham to sell them in his place. A man came in and wished to buy one. How old are you? Abraham asked the man. 50 years old, was the reply. Woe to such a man, he exclaimed. You are 50 years old and would worship a day-old object. On another occasion, a woman came in with a plateful of flour and requested him, take this and offer it to them. So he took a stick and broke them, and put the stick in the hand of the largest. When his father returned, he demanded, what have you done to them? I cannot conceal it from you. He rejoined, a woman came with a plateful of fine meal and requested me to offer it to them. I cannot conceal it from you, her rejoined. A woman came in with a plateful of fine meal and requested me to offer it to them. One claimed, I must eat first, while the other claimed, I must eat first. Thereupon the largest arose, took the stick and broke them. Why do you make sport of me? He cried out. Have they then any knowledge? Should not your ears hear what your mouth has said? He retorted. Thereupon he seized him and delivered him to Nimrod. Let us worship fire, said Nimrod. Let us rather worship water which quenches fire. Abraham replied, let us worship water. Let us rather worship the clouds which bear the water. Let us then worship the clouds. Let us worship the wind which disperses the clouds. Let us worship the wind. Let us worship human beings which can stand up to the wind. They are just bandying words, he exclaimed. We will worship nothing but fire. Behold, I will cast you into it, and let Hashem whom you adore come and save you from it. Now Haran was standing undecided.
There, it's a mistake, yeah.
Undecided. If Abraham is victorious, thought he, I will say that I am Abraham's belief. If Nimrod is victorious, I will say that I am on Nimrod's side. When Abraham descended into the furnace and was saved, Nimrod asked him, of whose belief are you? Of Abraham's, he replied. Thereupon he seized him and cast him into the fire. His inwards were scorched, and he died in the presence of his father. Hence it is written, and Haran died in the presence of his father Terah. What does
Have you heard the Midrash before?
You
heard this story? Not the whole thing. Not the whole thing. What a story.
So Abraham was there with his father when he didn't burn alive.
His brother was burnt alive.
Okay.
Yeah, the father was the idol. He had the store for the idols. Right? You know the story? You understood what happened?
It's a bit confusing, the dot
Yeah.
in the middle.
I mean, Abraham's father was Haran or Terah?
Terach.
Oh, okay.
His brother was Haran. Yeah, so Terach was a manufacturer of idols, okay? And he had to go to the market one day, so he left Avram in charge of the store. left Avram in charge of the store, first thing, someone came in, and instead of making a sale, he talked him out of it. He said, "What are you worshiping an idol for? That's ridiculous. Idol's 1 day old. I made this yesterday. You're going to be a 50-year-old man, you're going to worship this idol?" Okay, so first thing he did was bad for business. Another occasion, a woman came in, and she brought an offering. And this time, what Abraham did was destroy the whole store. He broke all the idols in his father's store, except for the largest one. The largest idol. What did he do? He put a stick in his hand. And when his father came back and he saw, what happened here? Everything's ruined. Avram explained. Well, the idols had a fight between them. Who's going to get the food which this woman brought to the idols? And the biggest one had a big stick. And he destroyed all the other idols. His father was very upset. He says, "Are you making fun of me? That's obviously impossible. Idols can't fight between themselves and destroy each other with a stick. It's a statue." So Avraham retorted to his father. He says, "Dad, don't you get it? Why should we be selling idols, making them and worshiping them if they can't even think and they can't hit each other? It's obvious that they're useless." This was Avraham's rebellion against paganism. According to this midrash, that's the way the story happened. And then he took him to Nimrod, and he tried to throw into the fire, and Avram tried to convince him a little bit of philosophy. Why should we worship the fire? Why should we worship the water? Why should we worship the water? Worship the wind. Why should we worship the wind? Right? The wind pushes the clouds, etc., etc. In the end, Avram is saved from the fire. It's an ancient tradition that Avram was thrown into the fire by Nimrod. And a little bit additional piece you may never heard before is that Avram had a brother. Avram's brother's name was Haran.
Lot's dad, Lot?
No, that's you're confusing that with a little bit later. That's the grandchildren. That's this week's parsha. We have Lavan and this was Avram's brother in before he became the Avraham that we know and love. Before he was chosen by God. This happened all the way back in Ur Kasdim, probably. Ur, the fire of Kasdim. Maybe that's what it refers to. Ur means fire. I said yesterday. In any case, Haran was not really a believer. He was just playing politics, trying to go with the winner, and so he was not saved from the fire. Only Avraham was. Anyways, where do we find this story? In the Midrash, Agadah, on the verse, the top of your page. Haran died in the presence of his father. What does that mean? Vayamot Haran al penei terach aviv. Most times it's just said, this guy died, this guy lived, this guy died, this guy lived, this guy had children, and then he died. And then this is a very strange phrase in the genealogy of the Torah. It says Haran died in the presence, al penei terach aviv. In the presence, we have, this is an interesting place to insert and to write down the tradition that we have. It was probably an oral tradition, which is not quite derived from the verse. But you can see that perhaps there's a hint in the verse, in the presence of his father. Well, what happened there? Why would Haran die in the presence of the father? Could be he just died early. Some kids die before their parents. It's a tragedy, but it does happen. But no, our sages say this is a hint to this tradition that we have, that there was this philosophical encounter with Abraham and his father and his brother. Haran also was somehow involved, and Haran was not the believer that Abraham was, and that's why he died in the face of his father, in the presence of his father. And of course, the rest of Judaism is we're all children of Abraham. We don't hear anymore of a Haran, this long lost brother of Avraham. He didn't make the cut. This is a beautiful midrash. There's a lot to analyze. You can see these questions about it. Think about it. What does it take to be a Jew? Why was Avraham? What was his philosophy? What was he proving? And what do we learn out of this? The way the story is told.
In a way, I know Terach kind of sacrificed his son.
Which one?
Haran.
Haran, not Haran. Haran.
If he hadn't taken Abraham to Nimrod,
That's right.
he would have lost his other son.
That's right. He brought it to head-to-head competition. And the poor younger brother, maybe he's a younger brother, maybe he's older, I don't know. But the poor brother of Avraham had to choose. He made a pretty wise decision, right? So I'll go with the winner. Not good enough. This is also part of the Midrash telling us you have to really believe in Hashem if you want to be saved from the fiery furnace. What a miracle. Wow, Avraham was saved from the fiery furnace. Do you know what this is should be reminding everybody of? Another story. In the Tanakh itself, someone was thrown into the furnace. Of course, Daniel and his friends. Daniel and the 3 young children. They were thrown into the fire furnace and they were saved. This midrash is maybe building off of that. Right? Who wrote the midrash? When's the midrash from? And the Moraim. Sometimes the midrash is a little bit later. But it's the Chazal. Did they have the Tanakh? Of course, they knew the book of Daniel. But what they did is they took the story from Daniel about dedication, about testing faith against a king, probably from the story of Daniel. But they tried to explain to us who Avraham was, what he was dealing with. And so maybe they had a tradition that the same story happened to Avraham. Could be that there was an oral tradition that finally gets written down. Could be that they, in their literary way, wanted to give over this message about the foundations of Jewish faith. Avraham and Haran not making it, not strong enough of faith. Just hedging your bets, as they say, is not really what faith is. And this is a wonderful midrash. This is midrash from Chazal, parallel to the Talmud, the same time period. 2 types, halacha and agadah. They both appear in the Talmud and they both appear in the midrash. It's a very confusing style. But you know where we actually find it until today? We actually love that mix so much. Right here in the book that we're studying. Pninei Halacha. It's primarily a book of halacha, is it not? Gives us the rules, the guidelines, what to do, when to do, how to do. But he always opens up the chapter with the ideas, the values, the history. Remember we had chapter 11. The whole chapter 11 was about the ideas of Hanukkah and the history of Hanukkah, correct? So this book itself is a mix. Even though it's called Pninei Halacha, it has in it halacha and agadah. And we like that, right? Because we don't want to just have a cold, cut and dry, do this, don't do that. We want to understand why we're doing things, right? We want to understand the meaning behind the mitzvot. And so until today, there are rabbis who are attempting to bring the halacha and agadah together, like it was in the Talmud and like it was in the Midrash. Okay, this is very, very ancient tradition of the oral Torah. We have both together. So far, so good? Okay, let's sing our song and then we'll come back to the laws of Hanukkah in chapter 13. We just got started, but let's take a little break and sing together, pray together. We're still in a time of war. We can never forget it. Baruch Hashem, this evening, my son is getting out of the army for a little furlough for the first Shabbat since Simchat Torah, 2 months. It's been 2 months. He's not been at home for Shabbat. Even when he was in the army, he was home every few weeks. But now, it's been a few months. So Baruch Hashem, we hope that we'll be successful in the war. And all the soldiers will be safe, and especially the captives will be safe where they are and be returned very soon. Yeah, another 10 were released yesterday, and another 10 are supposed to be released today. It's a very complicated situation, how we're going to deal with this. Page 231, the last 3 lines. You ready? Acheinu kol beit Yisrael, Acheinu kol beit Yisrael, הנתונים צרה ובשביה, עומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. Again. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים צרה ובשביה, עומדים בין בים ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה, למלחמה ומפלה לעולם, שיעמוד לגאולה השטר בגאולה ובזמן קריב. One more time, louder. Hamakom Yerachem Aleim Yotzir Mitzara Lilmacha Umefela Leolam Misyano Legeulah Hashtara Bagala Ufizman Karim. Amen, amen. Well done. Okay. All right. Chapter 13. Ready? Let's get to the laws. Where do we light the Hanukkah candles? The Talmud brings a Braita where it gives us 3 options. Page 265. I'll read it from the top. Sages state Hanukkah candles should be placed at the doorway, outside the home. That's number 1 option. One who lives on an upper floor, obviously doesn't have a doorway facing the outside. He places them in the window, facing the street. It sounds like you've got to be facing the street. So the doorway, we assume, is facing the street. And that's why it's the first option. But if you're on an upper floor, you don't have a doorway, so facing the street, so you'd put it in the window facing the street. And the third option is, in times of danger, it's sufficient to place them on the table. On the table, who's going to see them on the table? Huh? Yeah, yourself, the people of your household. So you won't be publicizing it for people outside. But what can you do? It's dangerous. Do you know that I was just told yesterday, I have a niece who is living in Cambridge now. She's doing a postdoctorate in Cambridge. And she said there's a whole community there of Israelis who are studying or working or whatever, but, you know, she's Israeli, and so they have all their friends. And some of them are taking down their mezuzot because it's dangerous. They're afraid of the anti-Semitism. Not her. She's proud. She painted. You know, it's been Thanksgiving there, so she She made a symbol.
Massachusetts?
No, in England.
Oxford.
Cambridge. It's not the same place, but it's not far. She made the cutout of the pumpkin in the shape of an Israeli flag, Magen David. And she wrote their kids' names in Hebrew, and they put that on the porch in front of the house. She is not afraid, or it's not willing to be cowed by the anti-Semites. But many people are, and I understand them. You don't want to get hurt. So there's times of danger. In the ancient times, there was real danger. You could be killed. And so you don't have to put your Chanukiah outside the door. You put it inside, not even in the window. In the window, they can see it. They can come in. They can target you. So if it's a time of danger, you don't put yourself in danger. You put it, the Chanukiah, inside the house, on the table. Everybody in the family can see it. You won't publicize the miracle outside the family. You don't want to put yourself in danger. So these are the three options, and we're going to see how that plays out nowadays. Okay. Shmuel, will you read for us, please? The sage in the past. Second paragraph on 265.
In the past, most people lived in single-story homes. A doorway led either to the street or to an enclosed courtyard with an exit to the street. The sages ordained that people should light at the exit to the street in order to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. They added that the candles should be lit to the left of the entranceway. This way, people passing through are surrounded by the mitzvot. The mezuzah on the right and the candles on the left.
Where does this come from? The same place, in the Talmud. Which, Masechet Shabbat, in the Talmud. What page?
2a.
And what was the previous quote that we had? 21b. This is the next page. We see there's a few pages in Masechet Shabbat which discuss the laws of Chanukah. So where do we put the Chanukiah? In the doorway. On which side of the doorway? Right, opposite the mezuzah. The mezuzah is always on the right, so the candles go on the left. So Shmuel, open up the door, please. Anybody see the mezuzah? Can you see the mezuzah?
As you come in,
As you come in, it's on the right, right? So where would you put your menorah, your Chanukiah? On the left, right, that's right. In the doorway, correct. Has anybody ever lit their Chanukah candles in the doorway?
Where's it in the Mikdash, the whole history,
Yeah, in the Mikdash it's inside. It's inside.
I mean, was it on north?
It was on the south side of the room, but it was not near the door in the Mikdash. It was inside, but it was on the south side. But this, of course, doorways can be in every direction of the world. But this idea is that you should be surrounded by mitzvot. It's very nice. There's another midrash. I'm calling it a midrash, even though it's in the Talmud, right? Because they're on the same level. There's another midrash. I'm not sure where it appears. It could be it's in the Gemara, and it says, you have the mezuzah on the right, and the Chanukah candles on the left, and what do you have in the middle? Yourself. And do you have any mitzvot on you? You have the brit, but you also have tzitzit. So you're surrounded by mitzvot. You have tzitziot on you, and you've got the mezuzah on your right, Chanukah candles on your left, enveloped with mitzvot. Beautiful, huh? It's a nice idea. Okay, further rules about where to light the Chanukah candles. So far, it sounds like the ideal is to put it in the doorway, right? If you don't have a doorway that faces the outside, then you put it in the window that faces the outside. Right, we had it before on the board. 1, 2, 3. Putting it on your dining room table, that's the last option. That's only if it's dangerous. But you want to show the candles outside. And if the doorway, that's a first option. Sometimes it's tricky. We're going to see the details in a minute. But sometimes it's tricky because in Jerusalem, for example, if you put the candles in the doorway that's facing the outside, right? Machon Meir, right? We have the doorway just right outside here. So what are you going to have, 100 students put their candles outside the door. Is that your door? Wait, you have a dorm room upstairs. It's complicated. Is that your doorway or is that your doorway? And then there's another problem. If you put it outside the doorway, just a few days ago there was crazy winds. But every day there's winds. It'll blow out your candles. Rain will blow out your candles. Now, can you really put them in the doorway? Some people say, the Talmud says, put them in the doorway. I'm going to put them in the doorway. But it's got to last for half an hour. We said that yesterday, right? It's got to be enough oil in there, or the candles be large enough, enough wax to last for half an hour. If the wind or rain is going to blow them out in a second, it's not kosher. So what do? I'm going to spend more than 5 shekels. I'm going to spend another 100 shekels. I'm going to buy myself a glass box. You know what they call them in the store? An aquarium. It's not for fish. An aquarium for Hanukkah candles. So that I can put them at the doorway outside. Like it said in the text. Outside the home. And it won't get blown out by the rain or the wind because it's protected by the glass. They still can see the candles because it's glass. We're so rich today, we can do that. I have in my home 2 aquariums of 2 different sizes because I have 2 different sizes of Chanukiot. A larger one and a smaller one. But so some people invest in an aquarium so that they can do the mitzvah in the ideal way, by the doorway. There's another midrash about why by the doorway, not just because you should be surrounded by mitzvot. This midrash says, it's a later midrash. It might even be from the Amoraim. Sometimes there are midrashim which are a little bit after the period of the Amoraim even. What's the next period after Chazal? Geonim, that's right, the period of the Geonim. So the Geonim is a title given to the leaders, the religious leaders in Babylon, in that area where the Jewish center of learning was, after the period of Chazal. So from year 500 to 1000, we have names of the Gaonim. Only the leader was called the Gaon. It wasn't necessarily that he was such a genius. It was a title given to the chief rabbi. It was called the Gaon. Anyways, in the period of the Gaonim, there's some more midrashim which are still being written. So not all the midrashim are from Chazal. This one in particular, I think it only appears a little bit after Chazal. The midrash says the Hellenists, the armies of Antiochus, who prohibited us from keeping the Torah, we rebelled against them, the religious persecution. What did they decree against us? You're not allowed to what? Study Torah. What else? No, we were allowed to light candles. There's another midrash that talks about the candles, but why are they called Chashmonaim? What are the other prohibitions against the Jews at the time? Brit Milah, Shabbat. They weren't allowed to keep Shabbat. And they say Chashmona is the Rashi Tivot of Chodesh, Shabbat and Milah. These 3. But some people add, and of course they made them bow down to idols, of course. This midrash says, you know what the Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, you know what they prohibited the Jews? They're not allowed to put doors on their homes. Fascinating. What kind of decree is that? What happens if you don't have a door on your home? What do you lose? Privacy. You don't have any privacy. Sure, people can take everything, but more than that. Mezuzah, true, but what else? What's the result if you don't have privacy? It's hard to be alone with your wife and to have children if you don't have privacy. So it's an attack against the Jewish family, right? The door is what enables you to have a unit, a family, with the warmth, with the intimacy, with the values, with the being fruitful, all that. So this is a beautiful expression of, in the Midrash, it says that's what the religious persecution consisted of. And then that makes a lot of sense why this Gemara says the ideal place to put your candles is at the door, at the entrance, at the doorway, because we fought against that persecution where we are lighting the candles because we're faithful to the values of Judaism, the values of privacy, of intimacy, of family, of home, and of course mezuzah as well, and tzitzit, and all the other mitzvot as well. Anyways, so ideally you should light the Hanukkah candles at the doorway. A lot of people don't do it that way because they don't have an aquarium. And they may be a little bit afraid. In some places around the world, it could be dangerous. So some people do it in the window. I think most people in America do it in the window still. Because it's just too cold also. It's so cold. December in New York, it's freezing. Stay inside and put the candles in the windowsill. You can still see it outside. It's mentioned in the Braita. You're allowed to. It's maybe second best, but it's still kosher. It's not like you need danger to put it in the window as opposed to the door. And so there's a few options. And then the third option, up until today, the people that light inside, because they say the third option is clearly kosher. Just put it inside, put it on the table, and you don't have to go outside anymore. Here, now that we're back in the land of Israel, a lot of people are going back to the original. They say, we're not afraid. And the climate is much more amenable to standing at the doorway for a few minutes, lighting your candles. It's not crazy. And so you invest a few more shekels, get a protective box, and you should light at the doorway like the original custom is. It's a beautiful thing. Anyways, we'll see. A few other laws about the Chanukiah. The sages further stated. Okay, Hananel, will you read for us? Page 265, the last paragraph.
The sages further stated ideally that menorah should be placed no lower than 3 tefachim from the ground and no higher than 10 tefachim from the ground.
What's a tefach? Tefachim. Tefachim is the plural of tefach. Tefach is a hand, the size of a hand's breadth. We usually assume it's about 10 centimeters. About 10 centimeters. And so you can't put the Hanukkah candles on the ground because they're not noticeable, I think. 3 tefachim above ground, how high is that? About 30 centimeters. So, and what's the maximum height? No higher than 10. 10 tefachim, that's about a meter. Some people say a tefach is 8 centimeters, so no higher than 80 centimeters. Turns out, you'll see a lot of people using this. A chair. It's perfect height. It's above 30 centimeters. And it's not, this is about 10 tefachim. So take a chair, you put it next to the doorway, put your Chanukiah on the chair, you got yourself perfect height for your Chanukiah. You could obviously use a table or some other way of putting it at the right height. Now obviously if you're in the window, you're going to do it at the height of the window. Right? But if this is only about if you're doing it at the doorway. So that's the if you have like the windows here, you could have it the right height, even with the window, because it's floor-to-ceiling windows. So you should do it at the proper height, in between 3 and 10 tefachs. Yeah?
What about the big menorah?
It's not kosher. Well, we're going to see. If you do place it higher than 10 tefachs, it could be kosher. It's not ideal, because it's not what people are going to see so well. But there is a maximum though. if you have a Chanukiah which is this height from the floor, your candles are this height. It's not ideal. It should be lower than 10 tefach, but it's still kosher up until what's the maximum? Oh, keep reading the page. Keep reading. Hananel, continue. The reason for this.
The reason for this is that it is very higher than you always see it. It is meant to illuminate the entrance to the house, to the home. Since when people used to light candles to illuminate their homes, they would place them in their entranceway at a height above 10 Tehrim. However, if it is placed lower than 10 H3 Tehrim, it is very close to the ground. People would think that the candle were placed there only temporarily, and they would soon move to an area that need to be illuminated. Only when the mineral is placed at height between 3 and 10 Tehrim is it clear to all that it was a bit to fulfill the mitzvah, and in this way the miracle is prophesied. In any case, but it won't like Mukat Kedar lower than 3 to him or higher than 10 to him. He has fulfilled his obligation. However, if one like Kedar at the entrance to his home and place them higher than 50 and not above 30 feet, he has not fulfilled his obligation. In such a case, the candles are so high that people are not likely to see them, as people will not normally look at them. They are so high.
Okay, so it is kosher above 10 tfachim. It's kosher as long as it's not so high that people don't look up. And that's 10 amot, 20 amot. And amma is 6 tfachim. So there's different ways of calculating it, but usually we say it's 6 tfachim. In any case, it's about 10 meters. Next, go ahead. Some people lived on upper floors. Yeah, yes, Yisra.
The can is the menorah. Can the height, the base of the light?
The light itself. What's important is the lights, the flame, not the base. So you want the flames to be in between 3 and 10, ideally. It's still kosher if it's lower, it's still kosher if it's higher, as long as it's not 20 amot, 10 meters high. That's not valid. What about, yeah?
In the community, the menorah outside, they put very high.
Right, so I think that maybe that's what Yosef was asking about. We said yesterday, that's probably not kosher anyways. That's not in somebody's house. The mitzvah is to light it in your house, where you live, not in the center of the town square. It's a nice custom to make public menorahs, to educate people, to publicize the miracle, but it's very hard to justify saying a bracha over such a candle lighting in a public place. So once you're not making a bracha on it, you can make it any height you want. You can make it on the top of the Times Square, on the top of the CN Tower if you're in Toronto. You can put a menorah anywhere you want, as long as it's you also light one, a kosher one, in your home. Put one on top of your car. Don't say a bracha, unless you're sleeping in your car. But then you have other problems. Okay? Fine. So we understood the basic. Now it gets a little more complicated. We're going to see all the details of modern day homes. Let's keep reading. Okay? Eov, I don't think you've read today. Let's go to number 2, please. Page 266 at the bottom.
Private homes. The sage's enactment seems to indicate that in the past there was no concern that the home should blow out the candles that were lit at the entrance to the home. Homes were built close together, AC and courtyards were enclosed by a wall, and there were no strong winds blowing between the homes. Therefore, evidently, it was possible to light candles outside entranceways and courtyards. without worrying that the candles would blow out. Today, though when one lights candles outside, the wind usually blows them out. The only way to protect the candles is to light them in a glass box, like an aquarium. However, the sages never require people to buy glass boxes in order to fulfill the mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles. Therefore, one who does not wish to buy a glass box may light the candles inside his house. However, if he lights in a window facing the street, he beautifies the mitzvah of exercising the miracle to do the same degree as one who lights in the entranceway. So he does not further beautify the mitzvah by lighting on the left side of the entranceway and thus surrounding himself with the mitzvah, the mezuzah on the right and the candles on the left. Those who wish to beautify the mitzvah to the greatest extent should buy a glass box and light outside the entranceway of the house on the left side. If several family members are lighting, as is the Ashkenazi custom, they should make sure that every menorah appears distinct, so that it is clear how many candles are lit on each day of Hanukkah. Another possibility is for other household members to light inside the home at the window.
That's what we do. I usually light, I told you I have an aquarium, so I light by my doorway. And usually my wife lights as well, and she lights inside the house on the windowsill. So we have two separate menorahs, and that's on the other side of the house, so people from all over can see that we're lighting Hanukkah candles, and we try to publicize the miracle. Tov, we're going to get into the details of what happens if you have a courtyard, if you have a stairwell, to B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. We're going to stop here for today, B'ezrat Hashem, and we'll continue the laws of Hanukkah tomorrow. And we might even play a game tomorrow.